Welcome to the Higher Ed Jobs Podcast, Ask the Expert Edition. I'm Andy Hibble, the Chief Operating Officer and one of the co-founders of Higher Ed Jobs.
And I'm Kelly Sherwin, the Director of Editorial Strategy. And today we're joined by Mark Need, a venture and startup attorney, professor, startup clinic director, entrepreneur, recording artist, and designer creator. Mark works with IU Ventures and teaches at the Indiana University Maurer School of Law, where he blends legal and business expertise to support innovation across the startup ecosystem. His work focuses on helping founders build scalable, solution-driven ventures, and he is dedicated to developing entrepreneurial approaches that create meaningful real-world impact. Mark, thanks so much for joining us today.
I'm happy to be here. Thanks, Kelly. I'm going to take you with me. That sounded like I like that description, the whole thing. You just travel around with me.
I think you need to add one or two more things to that list because you're not doing enough, okay?
They all overlap a lot. It's not as long of a list as you think it is, but I'll tell you that my principal role here is at Maurer is to run the entrepreneurship law clinic. So you can thank the whoever helped you with the introduction there that you didn't have to do the entrepreneurship law clinic part, because what I really get from people is he runs the Maurer's and I just have to yell from the crowd, startup law clinic. So yeah, it's a startup clinic. It's not just an entrepreneurship law clinic, but thanks. I'm happy to be here.
Let's get into the question from our listener. So the question today is, I have a JD and a bar license, but I have always had interest in higher ed. I want to work with law students and use my law degree to help students start their careers, but I have had difficulties getting into higher ed roles because I have little to no experience in working with higher ed and do not know many people in the particular field. So, Mark, what is your advice on how to get noticed when applying for these types of positions?
I get that question a lot, and I understand it. I think I was in that same position. I've been practicing for more than 30 years, and I think I was in that position 3 or 4 years out. A fond memory of law school, and wanting to stay connected to law school, but not sure how to do that. I think you come out of law school and you have a belief that the only path back to a law school is scholarship if you want to be an academic. And if you are maybe not even a practicing attorney, if you're a practicing attorney, but if you're in a JD Advantage role or otherwise, but you haven't focused on research or didn't see yourself as an academic when you're coming through law school, then the path is less clear. And let me help you in that regard. Mine had a dose of luck, I think, with it, but certainly, what I learned from that opportunity. If that path is to teaching, let's start there. A couple of thoughts on what to do and maybe also what not to do. Um, it sounds like a very silly piece of advice, right? Most of my cultural references are dated at this point, but there's a probably 40-plus-year-old movie, Bill Murray, called Meatballs, and the kid's getting ready to do the high jump, and he asks Bill Murray's character, he says, "I'm doing the high jump. Any last words of advice?" And Bill Murray's character says, "Yes, jump very high," right? Which sounds like the most obvious advice in the world. If your path is teaching, my advice to you is go teach, and that's not helpful if you're trying to find your way in. But that might be presenting at seminars, presenting at chambers of commerce, building a little bit of a brand around what your expertise is, and then finding where those opportunities are. For me, that was teaching for Indiana University's Kelley School of Business as an adjunct in their undergrad nighttime program, in a class that was offered, believe it or not, in a Kelley classroom that was inside of a shopping mall in the 90s, and taking over for a friend who was a JD who had taught business law in that position previously to freshmen and sophomores. As I'm sort of speaking somewhat negatively about that position, I don't mean to, because that really was an entry point for me, not only into the university system, but to think hard about what it meant to be a teacher when I had never had that, when I had wanted to do that, but was not an academic, had never thought about that before. What skills could I hone in the classroom that were more than some guy just bringing a set of war stories in and saying, this is what it's like in the real world, right? But really to think about lesson plans and what teaching looked like. that gave me, I think I got a teaching award early on. This would have been in the mid 90s. And that really gave me at least the opportunity, when the right opportunity presented itself in teaching where I wanted to be, which happens to be at my own law school at Maurer, to point to something, not to say I think I would be a good teacher or I could be a good teacher, but to say I've been teaching for 3 or 4 years, and it's not exactly the same rigors as law school, and it's not the exact same subject matter, but it gave me the opportunity to talk about how I thought about teaching. So two things on the things to do, before I tell you the things not to do. On the to do, one is teach wherever you can, and teach with a very broad definition of the word teach, whatever that is. Build a brand. Think about what lights you up, where your passion is, and where you think in your community, whatever that might be, might have a thirst for knowing more about that information, and just get out there and teach and look into maybe some adjunct opportunities that might not be right away at a law school, and do that. Second is, and I don't know if you are geographically close to your law school or not, and 2025, you certainly don't need to be geographically close to heed this piece of advice, which is stay close to your law school. I can tell you, being on this side of the table at this point, or this side of the fence at this point, that we need everybody's help. And again, I can't speak to your law school, but so much of what I learned in law school, so much of what I have learned about practicing law, I learned outside of law school. I learned after graduation. As the old saying goes, I learned how to think like a lawyer in law school. I learned how to practice law out in the practice. And the more that you can help a law school, if not your law school, bring some of those practical skills into the classroom, stay close. You would be surprised how much they probably would love and need your help, input, assistance on extracurricular matters, on speaking on panels, et cetera. Because I think a lot of us get out of law school and they think, well, if our law school reaches out because they want something from us, it's probably money. And of course, as part of a public university, we would never say no to money, but it's not just money either. We love people's time. If they can come in and say, this is what it's like on the ground, this is what it feels like to practice, this is what I thought practicing in this area was going to be like, and it's not, or this is something I never knew practicing in this area was going to be a part of this, and it is, and I love it. Law schools, my experience with those that I've been in contact with, including my own, is we're thirsty for them to come in. So stay close, teach where you can, whatever teaching means, and to the extent that that can be at a university as an adjunct or otherwise. Depending on the law school, that might even mean creating a class, right? I've got some expertise. I've looked at your course roster. You don't have anything in this area. Would you be interested in me coming down or over, or as it might be, and offering a 1 credit hour class on X, Y, and Z, or a lunch spot or something like that? You'd be really surprised. That's where those relationships start. What not to do on the other side of that, I would say, and this is a do as I say, not as I do, because I think I made this mistake to some degree when I interviewed, and now I tell people when they're coming in for interviews, on the skills side, on the practical side, there is a tendency, probably across disciplines, but certainly with the practice of law. It's a practitioner's art, right? You learn it by doing it. And there's a tendency to have this thought of, I was guilty of it myself, 14 years in, to practice at that point. Well, I've done this for 14 years. How hard could it be to teach it? Well, two things there. One is your audience at a law school that you want to become involved with are going to be probably largely a lot of academics who have taught their whole life, and it will not be received well if it comes off as, I've been doing this, how hard can it be to teach it? The second part of that is, it turns out it's true. Teaching is a thing. You could be the most amazing practitioner in the world, and not necessarily be a great teacher of that skill. I liken it to what I call a master class. I think Seth Godin has made this observation before, the master class effect, that I see Robert De Niro's teaching screenwriting, and I get excited about that on masterclass, and I want to sign up for it. But if you stop and think about it, you think, he's a great screenwriter. Does that mean he's a great teacher of screenwriting? Maybe, but maybe not. I have no idea. So these opportunities to teach And the way that you present yourself as you connect with these institutions has to be respectful of the teaching part, not only to game out the likelihood of staying connected in that regard, but because it's a real thing. I learned the hard way that I think I was pretty good at what I did as a practitioner. Teaching it was something else altogether. I'm 20 years in, and I'm still learning what that means to be a teacher. So, um, on the teaching side, definitely.
Mark, what a great story and what a great path to lead you to something that obviously you excel at and take great pride, pleasure, and joy in doing. I just kind of want to maybe do a little bit of a lightning round just to focus a little bit on the other side of the house, which is our administrative positions. If you're looking straight up for the university general counsel's office, that is always something that I would recommend taking a look at, networking within that. But it's a different sort of role. We work here at Higher Ed Jobs with lots of university councils offices, and they are fantastic professionals across the board in that community. But it's much more like being an in-house counsel than an external counsel at the larger institutions. The other place, that other couple places I would put out there in this question, there's a little bit about what seems like an interest in career services. I would focus, if you're interested in law students, at law student career services, and really kind of honing in on that and making that your goal. And then last but not least, I'd be remiss because this was the path I chose outside of law school, which was going into plan giving, which is, I say, is a little bit more esoteric on how you might help students, but by using your knowledge that you acquired in law school to help raise funds for your school, definitely has a huge impact on students being able to transition into law school and out of law school successfully. And you will have a lot of exposure to, and a lot of, boy, for lack of a better description, pride in the effects of what you have a hand, a small hand in playing. So just want to kind of make sure we added that side of the house to the discussion as well.
Yeah, I would, and I didn't mean to be too narrow in my focus. I certainly would support everything that you said there. I've worked very closely with our development office, and we've had development officers with JDs and those without, and they just help create and craft a relatable narrative to JDs and donors that are out there. And certainly, I've worked closely on different projects for the general counsel office over the years as well. So the opportunities in higher ed are very broad, as we like to say, and I'm sure that you say here, which is a JD is an amazing degree to do all kinds of things, not just go practice law. And higher ed is rife with opportunities for that.
So, Mark, I know you mentioned the teaching route earlier. Was there anything on the other side, the non-teaching route, that you wanted to touch on?
Yeah, there are ways to get involved in, and not necessarily if your path is pointed only at teaching. And I mentioned this briefly, which is support. When you're a few years out of law school and your law school reaches back out to you and says, we're looking for support, you just assume that they want you to write a check. And the reality is, we are all shorthanded. We all have, 10 ideas that we would love to put together for students, and bandwidth to cover three of them well. And I would say a lot of the extracurricular opportunities, maybe even ideas that you on the outside have that you think, this is something I wish we would have had when I was in law school. Your law school may be more receptive than you think to, grabbing coffee or lunch, somebody at your law school and sitting down and saying, this is something that I've experienced over and over that I wish I would have known about or learned about in law school. Just opportunities to participate from an extracurricular perspective. Of course, the traditional ones, judging moot court. We need judges for our transactional competitions, but we need authors to help us put transactional hypotheticals together. So more than what would I say? This is not your father's law school, right? The more than just appearing on a panel, but actually rolling up your sleeves and participating. The law schools are thirsty for those extracurricular participation opportunities as well.
That's great advice. And I can kind of see where the job seeker can't be, or the person interested in this opportunity can't be passive and just kind of wait and hope that someone reaches out, or just send a cover letter in. Like, you gave a lot of great examples of how to build your brand and teach where you can, and, staying connected and networking and volunteering. So this was fantastic advice. Great answer to this question.
I mean, Kelly, let me say really quickly, that was my path. That was how I what's the other thing about the old thing about it is part luck, but it's setting yourself up to be able to seize those opportunities. It was because I stayed close to my law school in my first 14 years of practice that when an opportunity opened up that fit what I was doing, the law school reached out because they knew that I wanted to stay connected and had seen that already and said, this is a national search. You've got to put your name in the hat with everybody else, but we thought of you. Well, I was on their the tip of their tongue because I had been down there a couple of times a year trying to help out with this and that. So,
Mark, I'd like to pivot just a little bit from where we were, because we've covered a lot of ground, and focus a little bit more on your neck of the woods, which is a profound experiential learning experience, where we've seen that happen across law schools, from clinics to externship programs to alumni mentorship networks and career development labs. Beyond these settings, including the general counsel's office and broader university administration, how do you think law degrees naturally I'm sorry, guys. How do law degrees naturally feed into or complement careers in academia?
I'll speak more as a bit of an expert on this phenomenon inside of law schools than I would in higher education generally, but I think it's there. I think thematically, one of the things that you hear about frequently or you experience yourself, depending on your degree, at graduate level programs, there's this chasm between what you're learning in the classroom and what the actual practice of that discipline looks like on the ground. Um, and and I would make the argument, though I don't have graduate degrees from a number of different disciplines, I'd make the argument that nowhere is that chasm greater than in law school. So for me, being able to come in as a practitioner and create or support experiential learning opportunities is a way to immediately bridge that gap. I think some of my those outside of the institution of legal education are surprised to find out how little opportunities there are for experiential opportunities and practice opportunities and real world opportunities in the law school. And that makes sort of the sale or the pitch for a clinic very easy, right? It's you're actually out and practicing law, experiencing what it looks like, which has all of the knock-on effects of, number one, the student gets some training so that they can hit the ground running out in the world after they graduate. Some of the benefits of that are the student might find out that they love a certain practice area or don't care for it at all and don't have to spend the first couple of years of their practice finding out that that's the case. I think the JD lends itself well to, I'll use business as an example. That same JD could go over and create experiential learning opportunities inside of a business school as well. Every law question, every legal question has a business dimension to it. Every business and strategy question has a legal dimension to it. And if you've been practicing at all, you can bring those experiences to light in a business school context as well. So I think everybody is thirsting to every unit, every discipline is probably thirsting at least a little bit to close that gap between the classroom and the real world. And JDs have experience in a lot of different areas and can bring that to a lot of different units, including law schools.
Well, thank you, Mark. That was a fantastic conversation, and we really appreciate your insights. And I think our listener that sent that question in will as well. So it was such a pleasure having you on the podcast today.
It was great to be here. Thank you for including me and letting me share a few thoughts on my own path into higher education.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you for all those folks who've spent the time and listened to the podcast today. We hope you found we hope you found Mark's words as interesting and important as we did. If you have any questions for Mark or for us, or ideas for the podcast, or thoughts about this episode, please feel free to email us at podcast@higheredjobs.com or send us a direct message on X @higheredcareers. Thanks again for listening, and we look forward to talking again real soon.